Hey, it's John at Tinderbox Arts. I want to talk to you today about something that I think is overlooked by a lot of riders, and that is the visual inspection. Now, I'm doing some maintenance today because I'll be doing a cross-country trip in about a month. And when I say cross-country, especially for my UK friends, that's a long distance. So in a 2-week period, I'll be doing somewhere between 6,500 and 7,000 miles. I'll be in very rural areas where there's no help. So if something goes wrong, it's up to me to fix it on the road. Now, I do keep very good records on my bike. And if anything needs to be done, I know, the last time I did it, by the date, the mileage, and I have a brief description of what I've done. So I know, as far as my maintenance schedule, where I am. But a visual inspection helps you find things that you might not think of otherwise. So today I have the fairings off anyway because I'm going to do a transmission oil change and I want to check the throttle body balance, so I needed to take this stuff off. But while everything is off, this is a great time to start doing a close visual inspection of some of the areas that could be a major problem if it goes wrong out on the road. So on this bike, the throttle bodies have a mechanical cable connection. When I turn the throttle up here, a cable all the way down here eventually pulls a butterfly flap for the throttle body, and that's a physical connection. That's something we can check to make sure there's no binding, that the throttle cables are routed correctly. And there is a known problem with some of these throttle bodies. There's a cam that is connected to the butterfly flap, and the cable connects to that. Now, it's not in an area that you can see easily, but if I try to get my finger in here, here's the cable coming in, and behind here is a little plastic cover, which I can probably snap up here one-handed. Let's see if I can do this one-handed. There. So you can pull that cover up, and there are two ways you might be able to see if there's a problem with that cam. What can happen on some of these models is that the cam, which is made of plastic, can develop cracks and eventually it'll break off. So that's obviously a problem out on the road. I can't really see in here very well, but if I look right, I'll try to get my finger in there, right here where I'm pointing right now in the center of your screen is a spring. That's a return spring. So I can check that. And what I can do is take my hand under here and I can feel for that cam. And what I'm feeling for is the center of it to make sure there's no cracks, or if I push on it and give it some pressure to make sure it doesn't move on me. This one does feel good. Another option potentially is to take an endoscope and put it in here if you have one, and you might be able to get an actual look at it. Now, if you think there might be a problem, you might want to take the throttle body completely out so you can get a good look. But in this case, I feel I'm in pretty good shape. Now, the air filter's right in here, and even though I know when it was replaced last, sometimes mice or bugs or all sorts of things can get up in there. And since it's so easy to just pop these two little pins out, I'll pop off the air horn and just take a quick look, make sure there's nothing growing in there, that it's not excessively dirty and that kind of thing. Another thing I'll look at, no matter where I am on the bike, are the harness connections to the various sensors and other things on the bike, because electrical issues can be really tough to figure out sometimes. So while I'm here, I'll just make sure there's nothing loose, that the connectors are, well seated. Sometimes I'll even disconnect them and make sure inside there's no corrosion, put them back in. And if you do that every once in a while, it helps reseat the electrical connection and make sure there's not going to be an issue as you're driving down the road. Also, while I'm in this area, I'm going to check the brake line connections. So if you look in here where my finger is, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 in there. I want to make sure there's no leaks. And if I look down in other areas as I'm going around, here's one right here, and there's some on the other side. And of course, I'm going to be looking at the brakes themselves because I want to make sure there's not any excessive filth or dirt in there, stuck in there. Again, I'm going to be looking for leaks, anything like that that would cause an issue with the brakes. Again, while I'm in this area, I want to look for any deterioration of the rubber components. So we have, these giant rubber boot here, I'll call it, leading to the throttle body, and you have a vacuum port right here, which is capped. That little cap can certainly degrade. And on the other side, you have a vacuum line right here, which can also degrade. As a matter of fact, it's okay for now, but at some point in the not too distant future, I'm just going to replace that on principle because it's just been there long enough. Now over on this left side, another area I'll concentrate on is right here. This is the fuel tank and the fuel pump is inside there. There are fuel connections here which can leak. Now there was a recall on this and my bike was part of that recall. So the dealer, which is I think the only time I've actually been to a dealer, did replace this for me at no charge. And I'm just making sure there's no problems there. You don't want to see any leaks. If you have excessive buildup of dirt in here, it tends to get in there. There's a little bit in mine. Sometimes I'll just vacuum that out. But I just want to make sure this whole area is clean and leak-free. While I'm standing up in this area, I'll point out that the clutch reservoir can be overfilled. When that happens, I actually have a video about this, the clutch can start slipping on you. So you want to make sure this is not overfilled. And also while I'm up here, I'm just going to look for excessive dirt in areas like in here. I may be able to spray that out and keep it clean and lubricated. Make sure the switch assembly here is not, coated in dirt and filth. I'll look at the key slot here again for dirt, and I may spray that just to keep it lubricated. Same thing with the key in the back, which helps remove the seat. The locks for the side case I also do keep an eye on. I have a whole video on how to take these apart and lubricate them. Now in this center area under the seat, there's a few things I want to look at. One is the battery connections. So I'll make sure these connections are tight and clean before I leave. And another thing I want to look at is to make sure that I'm trying to get a shot there, that the shock in the center here is not leaking on me. You definitely don't want that. And make sure the connection up top here is tight. And this rear brake reservoir can be an issue. If that's twisted on you, there's a rubber hose here that goes down, and that rubber hose can get pinched. So you just want to make sure this is aligned properly and that hose is aligned properly. This catch right here for the seat, I'll make sure it's not excessively dirty and make sure it's lubricated. Up top here, there are two things that I want to look at. One is the mount that I have for my GPS. This is a homemade mount. It served me very well, but I do want to make sure that it's strong and tight, nothing's moving on me, make sure I'm not going to have any issues with that, because that could be a major problem. And then this is something I look at pretty often, but the windshield has quite a mechanism here to go up and down. I want to make sure that's lubricated. When you don't lubricate that, that's when you often lead to breakage of those arms, so I definitely want to check that. Coming down in this area here, the fork tubes, I want to make sure are basically clean. There might be a little dirt there, but you don't want any major buildup there of dirt because that could lead to fork seals leaking, so I'll make sure that that's in good shape. Now in the front here, there's two things you might want to think about. One are the headlight bulbs themselves. Now I've had a bunch of interaction online about that, and these are LED, so they should last, but the connection to the bulb itself can be an issue, so that's something you can check now and make sure all the bulbs are working before you leave at least. And then the other thing I always like to check is the bug buildup on the oil cooler right here, and in my case there is some cleaning I need to do. Now there are different ways you can clean this. One way is to spray it with like a degreaser, and then from behind use a garden hose, not a pressure washer, just a garden hose, to spray those bugs once they're loosened a little bit out towards the front and get them out of there. You can try to use a bristle brush if you're very cautious about it. You definitely don't want to bend anything in here, but generally I just like to use a degreaser in the water, and that's enough to get the bugs out. Now down in this area, there are two things I'll check. The alternator belt, if you're not certain that it is replaced and is in good condition, then that's something you want to check. Pull this cover off and just make sure there's no cracks in the belt or excessive buildup of debris in that area here. And the other thing I'll look at are my crash bars. I just want to make sure there's no cracks in the wells or anything like that. Moving down to this area, important things here are the final drive, right? So you don't want to make sure there's nothing leaking for sure. This should all be dry here. Nothing on the inside rim here that would indicate a leak is starting. And you should be aware, of course, how long ago you replaced the oil in there. You want to make sure that the splines of the drive shaft are lubed. This is something I do frequently, so I'm certain in my case, but still I want to check for leaks before I go. And same thing with the transmission. I want to make sure that there's no leaks and that the fill and the drain plugs are tight. Looking up at the side cases right here, you can see where they kind of seat on the bike frame there, that is something I'll check. I'll take these bags off and make sure they're not excessively loose. There is a kind of a rubber piece right here. I want to make sure that's in decent shape because if these side bags start bouncing around on you, that could be kind of a problem. Right here is where I have my SAE pigtail tied to the battery, which I normally use for keeping the bike charged up, over winter months, but I also use it on the road for other things. So if I need to pump up a tire, I make my connection for the compressor, my little mini compressor, here on this SAE pigtail. So I want to make sure this is in good shape. Where it's tied to the frame here, I want to make sure there's nothing, binding and that I don't have a broken cable or anything like that. So definitely check that. Over here in the front, where the suspension connects, there's a ball joint right here. I can just make sure that that boot is solid. There's nothing loose there. I can shake the bike and just make sure it looks like it's doing what it's supposed to do. And in the shock in the back here, same thing. Just want to make sure where it connects to the mounting points is in good shape. Now, as we get lower here on the bike, I'm lying on the ground now. There's a few things down here I like to check. One is there's a window right here to check your oil. So you want to make sure you can see through the window for one thing, but also that the window is not leaking because it can. I like to make sure that my side stand and center stand are lubricated, that they're moving easily. There's nothing impeding their operation. And over here you have the infamous exhaust flap. I still have mine. They do make a device which will help you remove this totally. You can put a little piece of straight pipe here and a little electronic device which mimics how this works so that the bike doesn't throw a code and complain on you. But I still have mine, it still works. So I do want to make sure though, before I leave, that I do a self-check and that it's moving freely. You can lubricate that if you like. So when I'm going to be replacing my tire anyway, so I'll remove this exhaust and I can look in here closely to make sure that that's working correctly and it's not going to hang up on me. Now just above the side stand here, in this case, we got a starter here, and there's some electrical connections to the solenoid back here that I can check to make sure that they're not loose and that they are not covered in corrosion or anything like that. And then everywhere I go over this bike, if there is a fastener of any sort that I can check for tightness, I will do so, because sometimes things just loosen up randomly. You don't really realize it until it's too late. So now's your chance, while everything's open and it's sitting in your garage, that you can check these things. So whether you're going on a long cross-country trip like me, or whether you're just doing an annual maintenance, don't rely just on your records. Make sure you do a close visual inspection. It will often turn up things that you would have missed otherwise. And now's your chance, while everything's open and sitting in your garage, to fix these simple things before they become, a major problem out on the road.